Hello, you're listening to the IoT Weekly Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode number 28 of the IoT Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Gearforge Software. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend Cliff and Zeineb. How are you guys?
Killing it, Matthew. Just having a great week.
That is fantastic. And it is Friday. Thank God it's Friday.
Yep.
Oh my God, I'm so ready for the weekend.
Oh gosh.
It has been a week.
That it has.
But it's summer. It's beautiful here in Minnesota. Don't know how the weather is in Tunisia, Zeineb.
You know, even if it's a bad weather, it's a beach weather every day. So.
Yeah, beach weather. You can't beat that.
Can't beat that. No. So what have you guys been up to? Zeineb, how about you?
I got super excited this week because I am mentoring the new generation for the Thomas Jefferson Scholars, which is the scholarship I went on. So they're inviting me in for a panel and everything. I'm so excited about it. So.
Oh, that's so cool. You get to give back.
I do. I mean,
Good
they're not
for
letting me
you.
stay in the hotel, so that makes me sad. But a little bit of networking.
Good for you.
What
That's
about you,
awesome.
Cliff?
Yeah. So my son started soccer because school's out for him, and they had 3 games this week. So it makes some pretty late nights. I don't know. They start the games at like 7 or 7:30, and they're like an hour and a half long. So it's just been soccer all week, and then we got a dock for the river because I think some of you know that we live on the river and learned how to boat a couple weeks ago, and now we have a dock. So now we actually I gotta figure out, like, how do you install a dock and how do you put like the decking on a dock? And apparently, if you're not careful, your dock will float away on the Mississippi because, I mean, it'll change heights of a foot overnight and sometimes. So there's a lot of things I gotta figure out here this weekend on the dock.
Oh, that should be interesting. I can't wait to hear the stories about that.
Yeah, I'll get some pictures for you guys for that.
Good.
I feel like I don't want that to happen to anyone, but I feel like it would be quite hilarious to have a dock float away from me.
Oh, I talked to the neighbor, and they no longer put it in because they said many a times they'll get a call from their neighbor and say, "Hey, your dock's right down here," and they'll take the boat, drive down there, and pick up the dock. I'm like, how? That just seems crazy to me. So I've got this massive like steel cable that I'm gonna affix the dock to a tree, so that way, worst case, if it does try to float anywhere, it's just gonna get stuck on the tree.
It's just going to pull the tree out by the roots, and you're going to have a dock and a tree attached by a steel cable floating down the river.
That would be a
The
mess.
more the merrier.
Yep. That would be a super mess. So, wow. Matthew, how about you?
I want pictures. That's all I got to say.
I'll get some pictures for you guys this weekend.
Well, we did not have a dock installed. We did have a door installed, so we got a brand new beautiful front door, so it's very exciting to me. Gone is the heavy door with like solid door, and replaced by a nice glass one, so it lets all the good light in.
Cool.
And it looks great. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, the
And
bigger
it won't
question
float
is,
away.
well, yeah, but how do the dogs like it?
Well, they love it because they can, see the UPS guy coming up to the door with the packages and bark at them.
Yeah, and we all know the UPS guys and the mail people are so dangerous.
Yes, they are. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
They're gonna take over the world eventually.
Must be defended against, apparently.
Yep. Them coupled with squirrels is just gonna take everybody out.
Yes,
I feel like
absolutely.
it's school children. We shoot everybody around this neighborhood.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So yeah, that was fun. Get a new front door and totally changes the entryway.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So Cliff, do we have any feedback this week?
We did. So I got a couple different things. So I just want to say thank you so much, everybody that's listening in. Just a shout out to Justin. He requested an IoT button. So I've got a package sitting here next to me. I just have to walk over to the post office later this afternoon and send it to you. So
enjoy it, Justin.
Yeah, enjoy it, Justin. Thanks for listening. Really appreciate it.
Please,
and I can't wait to hear how it goes.
Yeah, let us know what you do with it. We're super curious.
And then we got some topic requests from some users. So I wanted to throw them in here. We'll take a look at these and talk about these later. So someone had asked a couple different areas. So one of them was BT mesh. And then also kind of like an outdoor use case versus LoRaWAN. They're curious with regards to Particle, if anyone else may beat their September release. Question regarding MQTT and other IoT messaging service built on containers instead of virtual machines. It's like, that's cool. And then predictive maintenance algorithms. So example, would love to know more about how to get some go-to approaches regardless of the use case. So really awesome topics. We will convene with Zeineb in the off air and then figure out how we may be able to get some of these here and spend a little time on those. As always, if you've got some feedback, please just shoot us a message at podcast@gearforgesoftware.com. Or we love Twitter, and we're at Gearforge IoT.
Yeah, and if you connect with us on either of those, Zeineb is managing our Twitter, so she'll be quick to get back to you. And I think our email works again, so
it does work again.
That's a positive.
We're just struggling with that email.
We mentioned this last week, but if you did email us in the past, you didn't hear anything back, it's not because we're jerks.
No.
We might be jerks, but that's not the reason why we didn't.
Usually it's lack of coffee.
Exactly. We did have a little configuration issue, and we've got that fixed. So we apologize if we missed something from you, but please do try us again. We weren't ignoring you.
Not at all.
All right. Well, that is excellent. So, Cliff, it's maybe time for our. Well, no, wait.
Zeineb's got some news.
Zeineb has some news.
We have some news. Drum roll, please. We have 1,000 followers on Twitter.
Woo! Hey, that is great.
Yes, I am so excited about it. We have some great followers, and they're out there on Twitter, and they're replying, and they're liking, and tweeting, and we're just engaging, which is absolutely amazing. We're having a party.
Super awesome.
Oh my gosh, that is so awesome.
And they like my memes.
Yeah, well, and on top of that, why this is so cool is back in January, we had like 3 followers, so this is big, and 2 of those followers were Matthew and I.
and your son, I believe.
Yes, and my son. So so this is very exciting. Great job, Zeineb.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, we've said it before, but we see the podcast as really primarily being sort of outreach and community building. We really want to get something out there and have people start a conversation, right? And it's great to see so many followers on Twitter and people interacting, because that's really the goal of this whole thing. So,
yes,
fantastic. Nice job.
Great job, Zeineb.
Thank you.
All right. Well, now it's time for a word from our sponsor.
So, word from the sponsor. Gearforge Software is an IoT consultant and offshore staff augmentation firm that works with SMBs across the country. If you need help with an IoT project or need developers for your next cool thing, give Gearforge Software a call. You can learn more at gearforgesoftware.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Are we ready for some news?
What? We have news this week?
We do.
I know. Shocker.
Oh my gosh. So I love interviews, but I feel like it's been a bit since we've done the news.
Yeah, we get a few interviews a month now, I think. And we get a few news sessions a month, I guess.
That's great.
Well, that's pretty good. And I think I'm going to kick it off today with an article about, I just found this super interesting. This is an article by Masha Borak from technode.com, and it's talking about IoT and Chinese manufacturers. And basically, there's a little bit of an IP theft problem going on. Maybe more than that. And this is something, I just think this is really fascinating. So basically,
Matthew, do you want to share what IP is for some folks if they don't know?
Yeah, for intellectual property.
Yep.
And basically there's a piracy issue happening, and this is maybe not a big surprise, but I thought it was interesting in the details about IoT. because so much of the manufacturing is happening in China.
Yep.
And because of, basically it's very, very hard to police. The article says China is interested in policing IP, but it is nearly impossible for them to do so. What will happen is companies send their IoT designs to China to have the boards manufactured, and those BOMs and schematics and designs are just lifted, right? They basically reverse engineer them and just steal the designs. It even says, to the point where the software itself, there are companies that basically work to crack and copy the software for these boards, and that encryption can help. But there's a sort of a black market for stealing these and then remanufacturing them for their own product line. And apparently it is just very difficult to police this or to stop this. And I just think it's interesting because it's kind of a side effect of the fact that so much of the manufacturing has been pushed to China. I just had a conversation with a client this very week about some of the trade-offs, right, of where you manufacture, and they're currently manufacturing in China, but they're looking at a US firm now. And I just think it's interesting. This wasn't on my list of things to think about.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you guys think of this?
Well, so let me see if I understand this, Matthew. So what you're saying is kind of like before, where you could get like a knockoff Prada bag, right? It's not the real thing, but it's a fake. So you're saying that essentially I could get a knockoff Alexa, and it's like maybe Alexi, right, or something like that, and it's going to carry potentially risks because it maybe doesn't have the same standards, but it's basically a knockoff of the original. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it actually is at a little bit more maybe fundamental level, though.
Sure.
That so you have a product idea, you develop the product, you do the research, you test the product, and then you want to manufacture the product. At the point where you manufacture the product, you're sending it to China, right, to be manufactured. And what's happening is they straight up are stealing that design.
That's crazy.
And the software.
That could easily kill a startup.
Yeah, and then they're remanufacturing, basically, right? So it's just completely stealing the IP.
Yeah.
And that is a very puzzling problem to solve.
So are there possible solutions that they're suggesting, or?
Yes, so definitely there are some suggestions related to their some legal options, although the biggest problem seems like it's just impossible to monitor, basically. But there are some options regarding like strategy, essentially. So they're saying things like, you might be safer if you break up your supply chain, so you don't have one person doing all of it, because they never get the whole piece. And the article actually advises, don't tell them what it's really for, lie about what it does, so that it's harder for them to figure out how to remanufacture it and turn it into a product, right?
Yeah.
And I would also say that you probably have less risk if whatever you're building relies on some other system that they can't get their hands on, right? So I'm thinking about, like, the hardware is fine, it's potentially useful, but a lot of this hardware isn't actually useful without the cloud backend or whatever, right? So are there, like, think about how you're manufacturing, but also what are the safeguards that you could put in place that would make the hardware really maybe not useful without the whole, having all the pieces together. So it's very
interesting.
Yeah.
Then, I do have to ask about the existing devices that are already being sold, and how can startups kind of encourage users to stay away from these kind of copies and that are low quality and probably carry a lot more security risks. Now you can just tell them, don't buy this. This is kind of bad for you.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I mean, this kind of thing makes me want to always do my research before I buy anything, like going with brands that I know versus brands that I don't. Um, yeah, maybe not buying the cheapest of everything.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think there's a lot of concern, especially with the security and everything else that goes along with this type of stuff, that
Mhm.
your risk is much higher, um, especially as a consumer.
Yeah.
Gosh, and I can't even, I'm still just imagining having your IP ripped off and then a firm over there taking it, getting it to market faster than you, and then
Mhm.
selling it, and they
And
probably have more funds to promote it.
well, and they can probably produce it first for less, so
Oh
they're
yeah,
Yeah.
undercutting you.
yep,
And it's interesting. They recommend don't work with the manufacturer that's doing that's actually manufacturing your boards, to also work on the firmware. Like that should be somebody else. So again, trying to split things up so that all of your IP isn't in one manufacturer's hands in China.
Mhm.
And this also makes me kind of wonder, like when we talk about total cost of ownership of these things, so it's more expensive to manufacture in the U.S. Or Canada or something like that. Um, but what is the trade-off? And one of the trade-offs might be you have a lot more legal protection in, like working within, if you're a company in the US and you're manufacturing in the US, you could definitely take that manufacturer to court, right?
yep,
Trying to do it in
Yeah.
China might be really difficult. So it's just something to think about. You're paying more for sure for
yep.
each unit, but what are you getting?
Well, I
Maybe
wouldn't even
a
know where to
lot.
start. Like, how do you take a firm over there to court?
I mean, it feels like it would be a waste of time and
I
money.
think so.
I mean, you're also a startup. You don't have much resources to even like
Oh,
take a US or a Canadian firm like to court, let alone some other country where the legal framework is not exactly to your advantage, I'd say.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yep,
Absolutely.
exactly.
So I just thought it was really interesting. And honestly, this was something I had never thought of, not
Really?
once. Yep. I mean, I was aware of problems with, cheap knockoffs coming from China, but I wasn't
Sure.
thinking about it from the sense of they're like you send it there to be manufactured and they're actively stealing it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a huge issue.
That's a huge issue.
Resourceful
Oh,
fellas.
it's also what?
They're very resourceful, I'd say.
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah,
would agree. Yeah.
definitely. So, Cliff, what do we have up next?
All right. Well, we've got an article by Patrick Nelson. It comes from networkworld.com, and it says for IoT, alternative location services are better than GPS. Really interesting article. So, what the article is talking about is specifically that traditional location positioning, let's say GPS, isn't going to be suitable for Internet of Things, right? And the reason for it is as you can imagine, the amount of power and bandwidth really it comes down to actually power and cost is the biggest issue because trying to um, have a GPS chip in there, ping the satellite, come back, and actually leverage this is going to be extremely expensive from a power standpoint.
Hmm.
And most of these IoT devices typically are leveraging a small little battery, and what they need to be able to do is be able to essentially ping uh, every so often to either get their information about the location or be able to push back location because a lot of stuff is being used specifically around location devices and tracking things like that.
Hmm.
And it's only going to increase as more and more of these go into the supply chain. And so what they're saying is from a article is talking about that we really need to think about changing up how we're actually figuring out location. And they've got a couple different scenarios that they're talking about in here. Um, and so I thought it was really interesting because they're like, hey, what if we actually get the IoT sensors to communicate themselves? And actually, based off of that, you could then end up getting the location that you need. So it's about how do you talk? to those from that standpoint. So there's a lot of different suggestions in here. There's also another company in here that's not even part of kind of the overall scenario, and they're actually creating just a software that you could actually ping like an API to actually get the location. So I thought that was really interesting too. So I think there's a lot of different. This is still very new, and I think this is going to be changing as we keep going into it. But it's currently in your, I guess you say, in your theoretical reign, not so much in the actual practical application. As far as where this is at.
Yeah, like university research lab type stuff.
Yes, right? Yep. So we're still very much into research phases of this, not so much the actual. Oh gosh.
Zeineb, was that in Tunisia? Did
yeah.
Go tearing by?
Someone was flying by.
That was a Tunisian motorcycle just going through the street.
Wow.
That is fantastic.
That sounds like fun.
It is.
Yeah. So definitely much in the theoretical range. So if you'd like to read up on kind of where things are headed or have some thoughts around this, really, really fun article with some links in here about kind of talking about random walking and a few other type scenarios. So I really found it really fascinating because I agree. I don't know how you're going to leverage GPS to determine location when your batteries are just so small, and most of them expect to at least last 3 years in most cases from a battery standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll be curious to see how that evolves. I suppose there's probably a lot of research being done on that right now.
Yeah.
Because location is, I mean, from our mobile days, Cliff, you remember this, location is a pain in the butt. And
it is.
It's like you really you kind of want to use the GPS stuff to get the right location, but it's exactly what you said. It drains the battery so fast, and on mobile you have to get all these extra permissions,
Yep.
And the app developers didn't want to do that, for a whole bunch of reasons, including privacy reasons, which makes sense. And so we wound up using really poor location, such as IP-based location.
Yep.
And that's different if you're on a cell network than if you're on Wi-Fi. So it was just made targeting really difficult, basically.
Well, I mean, thinking about this just because that's the interesting part is in mobile, in the mobile world, the phones are always moving. In typical scenario, unless this is actually like in a truck, right? Many cases, a lot of these, if they're in a field or something like that, or monitoring temperature, these are all fixed-based scenarios. So I'm really curious to see potentially if there's another way to think about this, right? Mm-hmm. I think everybody's still maybe thinking about this in the traditional sense, mm-hmm. versus think about it a little bit differently. Like, hey, what if a lot of these have really, I mean, accelerometers aren't that expensive. So basically an accelerometer will let you know if a device is moving or not.
Yep.
So if you know a device isn't moving, you can say, hey, on initialization, let's grab the location. And then unless it actually moves, we probably don't need to worry about getting location again. Because
sure, yeah.
I just think you're going to have a concept of like a fixed base type scenario, and you have kind of mobility type scenarios. So mm-hmm. I really think it's gonna progress. And if we look at this more from a practical aspect of things, I think there's different methods to do this. And the other part of it too is we all know that we are not going to have an ecosystem where everything's going to talk together. As much as we'd love that, that's not reality, because we've got so many different communication protocols, we've got so many different networking and everything else. That's not going to be the way this ends up happening, I don't think, just because I think you're going to have concerns specifically around the actual security of these devices on top of that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, something just kind of clicked in my brain too. Cliff, what do you think about our conversation about GDPR and this location stuff? What is the implication of that for sensors?
Oh gosh. I don't know. That's a great question, because is it tied to an individual? I don't know. How does
Right.
that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like
That's
it was asking, if
wow.
so we have a client who has a device that an employee would use.
Yeah.
Many employees could use it. There's not really a logon per se, but it definitely collects data while they're using it. What is the legal structure around that?
That's that's a great question. I wonder about that. I mean, location is definitely um, somewhat identifiable, I would say.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I see you're at a coffee shop, Matthew.
Uh-oh.
Aren't you supposed to be at work right now?
Yeah. Aren't you supposed to be at work? Huh. Zeineb, I see you're at the beach. Aren't you supposed to be at school?
Well,
Uh-oh.
that
Yeah.
motorcycle was on the beach.
I know.
Amazing.
Yes.
Pretty
Well,
impressive.
I think this is interesting. I can't wait to kind of learn more about where it goes.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep an eye on this one. This is the first kind of article I've seen come out specifically talking about locations type scenarios. And again, we're so early in this whole thing
Mhm.
um, that I think there's still quite a bit that's going to be sorted through.
Well, it might be a good idea for a future episode too. And Zeineb, I'll mention this to you right now while we're on that. Would be to just kind of take some of these topics like location. And do a little bit of research about what's going on sort of in the labs, because I bet it's out there. It might just not hit the headlines.
Yep, I would
Yeah.
agree.
And that might be actually really interesting to hear. This is the sort of crazy idea that some university, has and is researching about how to do location, or we've seen some of those with power, right?
Yep.
And just kind of a research-based episode might be kind of fun.
Oh, I think
Yeah,
so.
it
That'd be
sounds
really
actually
neat.
like really good.
Yeah. All right. Well, Zeineb, what do you want to tell us about some security stuff?
Oh, okay. So apparently security is not my favorite thing.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. So basically, the British Standards Institution, the guys who do the ISO certifications and all that, are presenting a new kind of certificate for IoT devices. It's almost like a sticker that you put on your IoT device saying that this is actually secure and you can use it. And basically, they just found that the number of IoT devices, especially the shadow IoT devices, are just exploding. And they found, we're talking about security issues and privacy issues, and they found that kind of having firms invest in this kind of certification can really help, like with the trust on the consumer side, with like securing your devices. And I think this would help with the whole Chinese thing, because I don't think a Chinese firm would do this, to be fair.
I don't know. This is interesting.
It is, but I mean, I read this and my first instinct is, well, the certificates like the ISOs and all that, they're very, very expensive, and not even for US firms and startups, they're also expensive to get worldwide. And it would put companies who can afford certificates like these at a great advantage. But what about those who can't afford it?
Well, I'll tell you what, I love this idea, and I see 100% get what you're saying, Zeineb. But if you are manufacturing at a certain scale, you have the money for this. Like it's just part of, if you have the money for a lawyer, you have the money for this. So I think this does exactly, it's actually just a really great idea. Is it puts there's some process, some vetting process that has to go into this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about the conversation we had last week with the interview about testing and the certifications,
Sure.
and how there are certain certifications you just have to get if you want your device to be considered for something like automotive or Department of Defense or whatever. And I kind of feel like this is, it's a different way of looking at this, not testing based, but having some certification process. Makes total sense. And as a consumer, I would really like to know that.
I would too.
Mhm.
The article says there's 3 different levels. So residential, commercial, and then high risk applications. And I really like the fact that they talk about there's a initial scenario around functionality interoperability, but then there's also regular monitoring and assessment,
Yeah.
which how many times have we, I mean, Zeineb, how many times we talked about that? Who's going back around and taking a look at your fridge? As
Yeah.
far as the security risks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for example, updates, right? It's like,
Yep.
great, it was secure the day it shipped, but 2 months later, it's not because there's a vulnerability found in something. Like it shipped, the device actually shipped with an embedded web server, and that web server is no longer secure. It needs to be
Yep.
updated. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the bsigroup.com site, and they're talking about, they're saying that, and this is for the UK, at least right now, that every household in the UK, and I'd be shocked if it's not more than this in the US, owns at least 10 internet connected devices, at least.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me.
I mean, and they're saying 15 by 2020. I mean, I'd be shocked if I walked around the house, I'd probably have more than 10.
Well, it's like I was telling you, when we had our furnace replaced, we got that new thermostat, and it's not
Yep.
particularly fancy, but it does connect to the internet. It's like, how many things in my house do I have that I don't even know connect to the internet?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm going to say 0 because
it doesn't seem to be an idea of luxury or not anymore. It's just kind of like,
it's just how it is.
yeah.
Oh, here's the regular monitoring assessment. It comprises of functional interoperability tests, penetration tests, and then a kite mark audit to review the penetration results in context of the product and review what actions have been taken. Huh.
So they really follow through with that.
Yeah, that's great.
It's even got a little sticker here, a mark of what it looks like.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll put this link in the article also, so we've got that.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
I just really like this. I feel like this is it's a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's a great incentive, like even marketing wise, for firms to just kind of really invest into securing their devices more than just for the sake of secure them, but also because you have that cute sticker and consumers want to buy your stuff.
Well, I mean, I just think about the things like the indications. What do they call that? It's not social proof, but maybe it is. The indications of trustworthiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
You look for the Better Business Bureau.
Mm-hmm.
You look for the what is it? The UL for electrical.
Yeah, actually, I was just looking up UL. I'm on their site right now, looking up the Internet of Things.
Huh. Yeah, sure.
Because I was curious if the UL is going to be doing something about this.
Yeah, I would think so, because this is specifically British. This is the British Standards Institute, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think it's a great idea, and we should have something like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know why. Yeah, here's an article on the UL. They've got a blog about Internet of Things. I think UL would be a great spot for us. It looks like this is a US-based scenario, so I don't see why they wouldn't be looking into IoT specifically.
I'm sure somebody is.
But that's probably because you need because in this specific case, the British government also released guidelines in March and everything like that. So you might want some kind of existing infrastructure to build on it with these kind of certificates as well.
Yeah.
And so I guess there's a longer time frame for this to happen in the US.
I wonder if somebody at UL would be interested in coming on for an interview.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You know what? I had kind of an idea, like a similar idea about a governmental organization who encourages IT projects, and I thought that would be such a great idea.
Yeah, we should totally see if we can get them.
Have a government episode.
I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that just about wraps things up for the news, doesn't it, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Those are some good articles.
Some great articles.
Yeah. So, folks, if you have feedback, as we mentioned before, you can shoot us a message at podcast@gearforgesoftware.com, and we will respond this time. Or you can find us on Twitter at GearforgeIoT, and we would love to hear from you. So please get in touch. And that just about wraps things up for this week's episode. So, guys, do you have anything fun planned for the weekend? Cliff, what about you?
I'm going to be working on the dock, so I've got to get that figured out.
Float down the river.
Yeah. And then I think I'm going to be sleeping a little bit. So I started some college in the morning, and it's just wearing me out. So probably sleeping, fishing, and getting the dock, and fingers crossed, maybe some sort of Battlefront if we can get that figured out, Matthew.
That would be so good. I could really use.
So could I. How about you, Matthew?
Well, so something you don't know about me is I'm really a big fan of Conan the Barbarian.
Oh,
wow.
Pretty much, yeah. The original stories through the movies and everything in between. So I found some Conan the Barbarian comic books that I haven't read yet. Picked them up at a book sale recently, and I'm hoping to maybe spend some time, sit in the sun and read some Conan comic books.
Nice.
If it doesn't rain this weekend.
That's right, exactly.
Oh,
yeah. Zeineb,
really hope it doesn't.
What about you, Zeineb? Plans?
Well, I'm trying to help some friends out, so hopefully I'll be brushing up on my web development e-marketing skills.
Ooh, nice.
Yay for online courses. I love those. But then also I have to do so much banking, so much paperwork because I'm turning into an adult.
Oh, adulting? Is that what you just said?
Oh, yes, I am adulting. I just opened my first bank account last week.
Wow.
What?
That's so funny, Zeineb. Adulting. You know, figuring out how to do the bank account. Good for you.
I know.
Yeah.
Super excited for it. Hopefully I'll have some time for that Bioshock Infinite DLC I've been wanting to do.
Well, and the best part of the bank account is getting money in the bank.
Exactly.
It is. That's fantastic. All right. Well, you guys, thanks so much for listening. We hope you'll join us again for next week's show. And until then, so long and be well.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.